The bank smelled like lemon-scented polish and old ambition, the kind of place designed to soothe nerves, with pastel walls and padded chairs that whispered compliance. It was quiet, save for the low murmur of clients and the mechanical cough of an overworked ATM near the door. This was the kind of silence where words cost money. Harper was already seated when I arrived. She had dressed with precision, slim-fit blazer, crisp blouse, lipstick a muted mauve that made her look every bit the successful entrepreneur. I noticed her posture before I noticed her face. Back rigid, ankles crossed, like she was rehearsing confidence. "Hey, Mom," she said, barely glancing up. "We're almost ready." Owen stood nearby, arms folded, fingers drumming the side of the banker's desk. He nodded at me like I was the doorman to their future. That smug half-smile that said, "Thanks for coming, stay out of the way." I took the seat beside Harper. A small sigh escaped as I settled in. Not from exertion, but from recognition. Recognition of my place in this scene. The banker, a woman maybe in her 40s with square glasses and a polite half-smile, looked up from the screen. "You must be Ruth. Thank you for coming in." I smiled, gentle and practiced. "Of course." She glanced at the document on her screen, eyes flicking back to Harper. "So you're the co-signer on the loan?" Before I could speak, Harper cut in, tone brisk. "She's just the co-signer, Mom." I felt it before I understood it. The word just dropped like a pebble, small but precise, made the whole moment tip sideways. Just the co-signer, not her mother, not her advocate, not the woman who once sold her wedding ring to cover Harper's first semester of college. Just the co-signer. There was no cruelty in her tone. That would have been easier to forgive. It was casual, thoughtless, like she was reading a menu and skipping over the sides. My throat tightened. I said nothing. Instead, I signed. A dozen pages slid across the desk. My name, in steady blue ink, looping beside hers. My signature. Currency now. Security, not sentiment. I barely listened as the banker explained repayment schedules and risk assessment. Harper nodded in all the right places. Owen made a joke about espresso machines being more expensive than engagement rings. Everyone laughed but me, and through it all, a quiet montage played behind my eyes. Harper, 6 years old, training wheels off, wobbling toward me down the cracked sidewalk. "Don't let go, Mama," she'd yelled, fear in her voice. I'd let go anyway. She didn't fall. Harper, 11, pacing the kitchen in a science fair panic, sugar glue stuck to her hair. I stayed up until 2 making her trifold board look like magic. Harper, 17, crying on the floor after a breakup, asking me through hiccuped sobs, "Is love always this awful?" I didn't lie to her. I said yes, and I held her until she fell asleep on my lap. None of those women were here today. She signed the final document with a flourish. The banker clicked a pen and smiled. "That's everything? Thank you both." Harper turned to me then at last. "Thanks, Mom. Seriously." I wanted to ask her, "Thanks for what? For the signature or the silence?" But I nodded, smiled, gave her the mother she expected. Pliant, present, poised. We walked out together, but not together. Harper and Owen moved as one unit, laughing about the location, debating furniture. I trailed behind, clutching my purse like it might keep me steady. Outside, the wind cut across the parking lot. The sun was too bright, too clean. "You okay, Mom?" Harper asked, finally noticing the shape of me. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded like the past tense of something. They drove off. I stood by my car a moment longer, watching the taillights shrink. Then I sat in the driver's seat and let the quiet settle. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror and whispered, "You're not just anything." The house greeted me like a showroom, staged but soulless. Every throw pillow aligned. The scent of lavender plug-ins wafted too cleanly, erasing the scent of old dinners and late-night tea. I dropped my purse onto the entry table with a thud, the sound echoing louder than it should have. This was my home, yet nothing inside it made noise unless I invited it to. In the living room, the lamp cast long shadows across the bookshelf, rows of tidy fiction, neatly alphabetized, unread. I moved to the kitchen where my mug still sat in the drying rack. The one Harper gave me for Mother's Day 4 years ago. World's okayest mom. She said it was a joke. I laughed. Of course I laughed. I stood at the sink, not moving, as the silence gathered around my ankles like smoke. This was not just silence, this was absence, a voice, a validation, a visible purpose. I wandered upstairs without removing my coat, the stairs creaking beneath familiar steps. My bedroom mirror reflected back a woman both intact and unraveling. Not haggard, not old, just dimmed. I tilted my head, as if from a different angle I might recognize the girl I used to be. The one who danced to Nina Simone while folding laundry. The one who used to hum lullabies into Harper's tangled curls. There was a photo pinned to my corkboard behind my desk. It had curled with time at the corners. Harper, age 15, holding up her first cafe mock-up. Cardboard, colored pencils, fire in her eyes. I remembered that fire. I fed it. I never asked for credit. Back then, cheering her on felt like breathing. Natural, necessary. She'd stay up past midnight planning menus while I made her cocoa and offered gentle notes. Too many items. Keep it focused. You want people to remember the best thing you do, not the most things. She'd nod, distracted, already redesigning the sign in her mind. I thought I was building a launch pad. I didn't realize I was also sanding myself down in the process. At book club that week, I barely spoke. Lauren noticed. She always did. "Still writing those review columns for the food blog?" she asked during dessert. Her tone was casual, but her eyes weren't. "Sometimes," I said, "when I'm not distracted." "Distracted by being erased?" she said low, her fork pushing untouched cake around the plate. "That's a distraction too." I didn't answer. Someone changed the subject. I let them. Later, in the parking lot, she pulled me aside. "You raised her. You held her whole world in your hands for decades. If she doesn't see you now, that's not your failure. It's hers." "I made her strong," I said, "independent. You also made her blind to the structure that held her. Maybe it's time she hears the creaks." That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the office and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. A habit, a way of feeling useful. Inside was a bundle of old bank statements, paper-clipped, labeled Harper 2009-2013. I unfolded one. March 12, 2010. Disbursement, $8,450. Harper Sinclair. Student loan payment. I froze. The check was in my name. Another one. May 5th, 2011. Payment, $3,275. Harper Sinclair Consolidated Tuition. And another, and another. I had forgotten. No, that wasn't true. I had buried it. Filed it under unnecessary history. My signature stared up at me like an echo finally answering back. I had paid off her loans. Quietly. Without request. Without fanfare. Harper had called last year to vent about student debt. "Still climbing out," she'd said. "Should have gone to a cheaper school." I didn't correct her. I let her believe it. Now I sat on the floor. The statements spread like evidence. Not to weaponize, not to punish, just to remember myself. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in 6 months. She said I'm just a cosigner, but these documents say otherwise. I didn't sign to co anything. I signed everything away so she could have everything. The next morning, I brewed coffee in silence. The mug in my hand read, "World's okayest mom." I turned it upside down. Let it drip dry in the sink. My voice wasn't gone. It had just been filed away, like those statements, waiting for a reason to rise. And now, slowly, quietly, it was returning. A single beam of late afternoon light traced across the counter and landed on the jagged edge of a manila folder labeled Debt of Record. Inside, my fingers hovered over the topmost document, a faded tuition statement, a lifetime ago. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I'd hidden for years. I unfolded it slowly. Blue ink annotations, still crisp where I'd noted the date of payment, the check number, the amount, $3,500, tuition for her sophomore year. I exhaled as if I'd been holding a storm. There were dozens more, housing deposits, late fees, medical bills from her second miscarriage that she never mentioned. All erased quietly, from my account to hers month after month. I felt a rush of betrayal, delicate, unexpected, because she never knew. She should have known. She'd complained once to Owen 2 years ago. "We're fine, but savings are tight again." I remember her words exactly. I'd been in the next room, pretending to read. She said, "Maybe we should ask Mom for help." Owen shook his head and laughed. "She's not writing another check." I listened. I understood their assumption, their disappointment in me. It cut deeper to think I'd let them assume. Another statement slipped from the folder, one covering her wedding dress deposit. The total was modest, $600. But I remembered how I'd held my tongue when she said she'd handle it. I mailed the check anyway, slipping it in with a note, just in case. No one ever asked. Tears pooled behind my lashes. Not tears of regret exactly, but of recognition. Recognition of how much I'd paid to rewrite her story, without a single line of credit for myself. A pounding at the front door. Lauren's voice, warm, concerned, cut through the haze. I opened it to find her holding a tall coffee and a loaf of banana bread. She peered past me at the folder. "It's time to open it," she said softly. We sat at the kitchen island. Slices of bread sweet enough to shame the tears. I laid out 3 statements. She read the first, paused, then looked at me. "This is motherhood. Hidden, not acknowledged. But you need your own ledger, Ruth." Her eyes were steady, not accusing, holding space for something I was just beginning to name in myself. I said nothing. Instead, I placed a second document in front of her. The wedding deposit. "I thought she'd handle it," I confessed, voice cracking. I should have told her. But by then she'd already smiled at Owen, waved back at guests, inserted me into the background of holiday cards. Just another face in the rows. Lauren placed her hand over mine. Warm, insistent. "She doesn't need another bill paid. She needs witness," she said. "We need to map this out." So we did. An inventory. Every check I'd written, every debt I'd erased, every step I took to minimize my presence even as I financed her life. My tears came then. Not for money lost, but for the love I spent without ever asking for acknowledgement. A new emotion surged. Liberation. For decades I'd disguised, maternal invisibility masquerading as support. But now I could see. I saved her. And in doing so, I disguised my own contribution. Lauren helped me create a ledger, not to present to Harper, but to reclaim my own truth. Line by line, we tallied the costs. We sorted them by category: tuition, wedding, emergencies, maintenance. We totaled the emotional price too, though we didn't put numbers to it. When the ledger stood finished, it filled 2 sheets of graph paper. Handwritten, honest, true. I stared at it, and pride flickered in the exhaustion. I had done something extraordinary. I had given invisibly. But now it lived, and it deserved existence, not apology, not explanation, just recognition. I folded the paper and placed it in the locked box labeled Legacy, next to the faded photos of Harper in her fairy princess gown, me on stage at graduation, her first house keys taped to a note I'd written, "Welcome home, my spark." Lauren cleared the dishes silently, giving me space. The room felt different then, not lighter but more real. I said softly, "I saved her." She smiled, grief softened. "Yes, and now you save yourself." The first thing I noticed when I opened the door to my childhood home was the smell. Not musty exactly, just tired. The kind of tired that settles into the corners of a place like fog and doesn't leave. Paint peeled near the baseboards. The hallway carpet, once a soft forest green, was now threadbare in stripes from decades of pacing. I walked through the living room, brushing my hand against the wall where the old family clock once hung. It was gone now, sold at an estate sale long before the house was handed down to me in quiet legalese after my mother's death. But the echo of it remained. I could almost hear its tick, its certainty. The kitchen was smaller than I remembered. Less menacing, too. The cabinets still bore the scratch marks from my mother's aluminum pots. I stood at the sink and looked out the window. My childhood view: gravel driveway, overgrown garden, the birch tree I used to hide behind when I didn't want to come inside. Flash, her voice. Edith, my mother. Lean and severe, eyes like unforgiving moonlight. "We don't deserve praise," she would say, lips pressed into a hard line as she folded laundry. "We survive. We serve. That's enough." I believed her. As a girl, I took those words like communion. I didn't ask for praise. I learned to tie my shoes in silence, to make perfect beds, to stir soup with the wooden spoon she approved of. And when I became a mother, I carried that script into a new home, a gentler house. But the story was the same. Serve quietly. Do not ask. Love without receipt. There's a photo in an old frame I'd left behind in this house. tucked in the top drawer of my childhood dresser. I found it again now, dust clinging to the glass. I was maybe 27 in it. Hair messy, eyes sunken from exhaustion. I'm standing at the ironing board, pressing a tiny dress. In the background, barely visible, baby Harper sleeps on a folded towel on the couch, her arms up like she's flying. I remember that day. I'd worked a night shift at the hospital, come home to a crying newborn, and still took the time to iron her clothes, not for anyone else, for her, for the idea of what she deserved. Lauren came by later that week. She brought coffee, no cream, and a reusable mug with a chip on the rim. "Settling in?" she asked, eyeing the collapsed wallpaper in the hallway. "Trying to. The ghosts are louder here." "Yours or hers?" "Both." We sat on the porch. The wind snapped through the old screen door. "I found a photo," I told her. Me ironing. Harper asleep. I was younger than she is now. She sipped. "You always loved her out loud." "Did I?" "In every action. You gave her what you didn't get. But here's the thing." She turned toward me. "Your love became her air. Now she breathes without thinking, and she thinks that means she doesn't need you anymore." I looked away. "That's not her fault," Lauren added. "It's the script. It's what we inherit. She doesn't even see it, because it's invisible when it's always been there." I nodded, throat tight. "Undoing this? Rewriting it? I'm afraid it'll cost me her approval." Lauren didn't flinch. "It will." I looked at her. "But you already lost her approval," she said. It just wore a smile. The silence between us was full, but not heavy. Later that night, while organizing boxes of legal mail forwarded from my old address, I found an envelope I hadn't opened. It was from Harper's accountant, addressed to me. The handwriting was careful, corporate. Inside, a brief message. "Per our records, the capital funds secured for the Cafe Clover expansion were not drawn from the approved business loan. Instead, disbursements were made directly from the Sinclair Family Trust, established in 1998 under your name. Attached is a copy of the withdrawal schedule and authorization signature." I read it twice, 3 times. My trust. The one Thomas and I had built when we still believed in things like future-proofing and shared ambition. My name was on it, but the funds were gone, drawn by Harper, signed quietly. She hadn't needed a loan co-signer. She needed access, and she got it. I stood in the hallway of my mother's house, paint curling near the window, wind in the birch outside, and I felt the script split. Not just because of what Harper had done, but because I finally saw what I had allowed. I had been quiet for so long I forgot I had a pen in my hand. But now, I was ready to write my own ending. The afternoon light filtered in through the blinds, dust particles dancing across the surface of the file cabinet beside my desk. I'd never paid it much mind, just old administrative clutter. But after the accountant's message, each drawer felt suddenly significant. The top one, labeled Family Documents, held everything I'd tried to forget. Inside was the trust folder, embossed in black leather, edges scuffed by decades. The title glinted soft and formal, Sinclair Family Trust. Beneath it, my name, Ruth Sinclair, typed in crisp letters, alongside my late husband's signature. It had been dormant for years, untouched since Harper's college loans were supposedly exhausted. I'd filed it away, convinced it was obsolete. Now, it stood in the center of my living room, folder open, papers fanned out. The binding held every signature, clause, and amendment, rich in legalese and intent. I flipped through to the section labeled Permitted Disbursements. Educational expenses, yes, but also business startup costs related to cafe management and expansion. The words pulsed with unspoken promises. My phone rang. It was the banker's office. Familiar voice, professional and clipped, possibly scripted. "Mrs. Sinclair, this is Patricia from Davis and Gray Bank. We reviewed the trust documentation. Technically, the funds for Cafe Clover should have been drawn from the trust, not through a business loan." Her tone was polite but firm, factual, unyielding. "Is everything okay?" I couldn't speak. The weight of her words hung between us like an admission. I managed, voice low. My hands trembled, holding onto the countertop. "That trust, I didn't even remember." There was a pause. Then, "The trust was established as a safeguard, Mrs. Sinclair, for situations just like this." I ended the call, heart pounding. The trust folder felt heavier now, a key turned in a long-locked door. Later that day, I met with Neil, a family lawyer I'd called on the accountant's advice. He was sharp, kind eyes set behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who could see under surfaces. "I've reviewed the documents," he said, organizing loose copies across his desk like rising dominoes. "Legally, you have full authority over disbursements. It was your decision to let the business take a loan instead." I swallowed. I thought I was helping her build credit, that I was being a mother. Neil leaned back. "You upheld the spirit, if not the letter of the trust. But she signed off on the loan application, right?" I nodded. She said, "It'll teach me responsibility." I believed her. He nodded thoughtfully. "It's hard to argue with that one. Her signature binds her, legally and morally." He paused. "Your question now is what you value more, financial restitution or relationship integrity?" I closed my eyes. I felt torn between righteous exposure and peaceful surrender. My phone buzzed. A news alert, Equinox today, astrological moment for renewal. The timing felt ironic. On the date of perfect balance, my world was tilted out of sync. Neil cleared his throat. "Financially, you could demand repayment from the trust, but you risk exposing her actions publicly. Personally, that means estrangement." I touched my chest. "I want something different. I want truth, not punishment. I want transparency." He nodded. "Then we build a plan. We call a meeting. You share the findings. She gets a chance to explain, to apologize. You decide what happens next." We spent the next hour mapping the confrontation, setting tone, creating parameters, leaving room for mercy and accountability. The legal side became a tool, not a weapon. As I drove home, the sky was the color of brass. The changing season pressed into me, reminding me, equilibrium is never one-sided. That evening, I laid everything out on my desk. Trust folder open. Bank statements, loan documents. A photo of Thomas and me, late spring, his hand in mine, smiles easy in the golden light. I stared at the photo. We'd set up that trust to bridge gaps between love and security, to protect our daughter. I didn't know then that love could invert so quietly that it amounts to erasure. My hands hovered over the documents. I didn't feel righteous. I felt resolute. I typed a message to Harper. "Can we talk? I have something to show you tomorrow. It's important." I paused, thumb hovering. Send or delete. I sent it. Maybe it cost me her approval, but at least I found mine. The whiskey glass caught the sunlight in fractured slants, its amber body glowing like something sacred and spent. I didn't usually drink in the afternoon, and certainly not with men like Owen, but today wasn't usual. It wasn't revenge either. It was recognition. I had arranged the meeting by text. "My home office. One drink, one conversation. You owe me that." He showed up on time, dressed too clean for a man trying to feign innocence. Button down tucked just a little too neatly, no tie, sleeves rolled, not a crease out of place. He smelled like cedar and assurance. He always had. Lauren sat quietly on the far side of the room, under the pretense of working on her manuscript, but really, she was my shield. Her presence didn't threaten. It witnessed. Owen glanced her way when he entered. "Is she staying?" I met his eyes. "She's not the problem here." He sat, one leg crossed over the other. Took the glass I offered. Didn't touch it yet. "So what's this about?" I opened the folder between us, the trust documents, bank statements, printed emails from the accountant. I pushed them across the table slowly. I didn't dramatize it. "You used my trust," I said plainly. He looked at the first page, then the second. His eyes flickered, fast, then masked. "I don't know what this is," he said too quickly. "You do." My voice was calm, level. "You and Harper used it, without informing me. You bypassed the loan structure, and when that wasn't enough, you disguised the disbursement as bank-backed credit. Only it wasn't." He leaned back. "Look, I don't manage the finances. That's Harper's side. Maybe there was confusion. Maybe—" I raised a hand. "Don't insult me with maybe." Lauren stayed still, though I could feel the tension in her silence. Her pen hovered above a legal pad, unmoving. "You think I won't press charges?" I asked. Not loudly, not threatening, just inviting honesty. Owen picked up the whiskey, took a sip, swallowed hard. "We needed funding fast, the cafe renovation delays, they were bleeding us. The bank was stalling, and Harper said the trust had been set up for emergencies, that it was hers by intent. But not by law, I replied, and not by disclosure. That trust was established with my name, my authorization, and my consent required, none of which you asked for. He tried to laugh, an uncomfortable lawyer cocktail party sort of chuckle. We thought we'd tell you eventually. After the success? After the write-off? I said. After I was conveniently too old to care? His face reddened. That's not fair. No, I said, but it's accurate. Lauren's voice came from the corner then, quiet, but unmistakable. Did Harper know? Owen turned toward her, momentarily forgetting himself. She's not malicious. That's not what I asked, Lauren replied, pen finally making contact with paper. I stood, walked to the window. Sunlight cut through the blinds in sharp lines. Dust motes spun in the air, visible only because of the light. That felt familiar, truth only visible when the angle shifted. You didn't even flinch when I signed the cosigner line, I said, still facing the window. You let her say it. She's just a cosigner. You smiled. Owen sighed. We were under pressure. I didn't mean for it to feel disrespectful. It didn't feel disrespectful, I said. It felt final. He stood then, pacing lightly, palms open in mock diplomacy. So what now? You want us to pay it back? No, I said, turning. I want you to understand that it's no longer yours to draw from. That the trust has been restructured. That access is revoked, permanently. He blinked. You can't do that. I already did. His lips parted, then closed. Anger tried to surface, but found no traction. I had taken the breath from his deflection. You'll ruin her, he said softly, like it was a last card. The cafe needs stability, investors. She's on the brink of real success. I'm not ruining her, I replied. I'm removing the safety net that you've both mistaken for a trampoline. Lauren scribbled that line down. Owen walked to the door, paused, looked at me like a man choosing between exit lines. You're still her mother, he said. She still loves you. I nodded once. Then she can find me again, when she's ready to love me for who I am, not what I fund. He opened the door. Light spilled across the floor. I hope she comes back, he said. I didn't answer. He left. Lauren set her pen down. You didn't shout, she said, impressed. I didn't need to, I replied. Some truths echo on their own. I turned back to the desk. The trust folder sat neatly beside the whiskey glass, now half empty. Ownership didn't need volume. It just needed presence. And for the first time in years, I had both. The spreadsheet printouts lay across my dining table, yellowed at the edges, numbers stretching into columns like silent witnesses. Each cell glowed with implication. $17,500, Cafe Clover rent advance. $12,000, annual interest, compounded. $85,000, total. Beside them, a photo album, checks pad edition, the kind investigators use, snapped images of every cleared check, endorsed R. Sinclair, every memo line varying, brewery delay, equipment repair, staff emergency. My hand trembled slightly as I flipped through the pages. Each deposit, operational cost, personal loan had passed through my account, unremarked, assumed necessary. I pressed play on my phone. The soft hum of my voice filled the room. $85,000. That's not a donation. That's a down payment on erasure. That's every semester, every car repair, every unexpected winter's electric bill I covered so Harper wouldn't have to. The spreadsheet didn't lie. Its columns didn't forgive. And my voice, steady, clear, held the weight. Whit sat across from me. He watched respectfully, tablet open, cross-referencing bank statements with photos. A friend and part-time investigator, his childhood had taught him to read between lines. Today, he helped me turn them into evidence. How are you feeling? He asked softly. The apartment felt colder without the hum of cherry blossoms outside. Visible, I said. My tone was factual, not triumphant. For the first time in years. He nodded. Let's move this to the corkboard. We walked to the pin board I'd installed in the hallway, reserved for priorities. Whit pinned the spreadsheet in the center, framing it with photographs, checks, deposit receipts, digital transfers. Around them, color-coded notes. March 2018, $5,000 back rent. June 2019, $8,000 new oven. December 2020, $2,000 interest. My presence in those numbers demanded space. The ledger commanded attention. I stepped back. The board was a constellation I'd mapped, my constellations once invisible, now glowing. Whit and I worked late into the evening. He graded index cards with short headlines. Invisible labor not equal to unpaid debt. Financial boundaries begin here. Truth greater than appearances. I wrote the top card in my own hand. Receipts never lie. When I pinned it above the spreadsheet, the echo felt structural. The next morning, I invited Lauren and Neil over. Lauren brought coffee and quiet support. Neil brought legal insight and sturdy folder covers. They arrived as I was labeling categories: mortgage backing, business operations, emergency rescue. The women of my life gathered around as I pulled out the corkboard like a curtain being drawn in daylight. I said, "Harper once said I was just a cosigner. That I'm not essential. Here's the record." Lauren's eyes tracked the lines. She put a hand on my shoulder. "Your work is clear." Neil asked, "What's your plan for this?" I inhaled deeply. "I'll share the board with her. Then I'll offer space for conversation before the courtroom gets involved." He looked relieved. "That's wise." I nodded. "This isn't about coercion. It's about recognition." Over the next several days, the board stayed public, visible in my living room, visible to visitors, visible to me when I passed it. I organized weekly dinners here with close friends, subtly asking for feedback. Does this feel fair? Is silence easier or so expensive? Each dinner ended with affirmation and tears. People wrapped me in shoulders and words I'd longed to hear. "You were never the problem. Your labor deserves respect." On the seventh evening, Whit carried a printed email, time-stamped, addressed from my lawyer to Harper's attorney. It stated, "Please review enclosed documentation demonstrating Mrs. Sinclair's contributions to business operations. This notice initiates a period of dialogue before civil recourse." I took the paper and walked to the board. I added it to the side, underlined, "Public record is not punishment, it's accountability." I thought about consequences, legal friction, emotional rupture, but I also thought about truth, the truth born from receipts, from spreadsheets, from years spent shaping someone else's vision without envisioning my own. That night, I sat across from the corkboard, wine glass in hand, an ironic toast, perhaps, to my own rediscovery. Each rustling number whispered differently now. I wasn't being erased. I was being named. The wine tasted of acceptance, not celebration. Over the next week, I didn't wait. I built a presentation, slides with ledger entries, photos, bolded totals, interactive, clickable links, highlighted notes, color-coded into emotional categories: invisibility, investment, assertion. On the morning of our scheduled call, I deep-cleaned the apartment, removed personal trinkets, left only the board and a pitcher of water. Whit stayed offline, ready to support. Lauren brought quiet solidarity. I wore a blazer, not to intimidate, but to say, "I am here. I stand." And on the call, when Harper asked, "Why?" I responded not with grief, but with clarity. "My ledger isn't to punish. It's to say, I was here even when you couldn't see me." She paused, then asked, "Can we talk about it together?" I heard the hinge shift. Weeks later, after negotiations, after conversation, after tears, we met in a neutral office. The board was still with me. Harper hesitated before it. "I saw all of it." I nodded. "It was yours. And mine too." Her whisper, "I'm sorry." No apology would erase everything, but it was a beginning. Later, when I removed the spreadsheet from the board, I replaced it with a simple print. Accountability changes everything. Receipt numbers gave way to a message wider than finance. That night, Whit and Lauren joined me by the corkboard. We erased the remaining paper lines, but left the pinboard in place. "The ledger can go," I said, voice steady. "But the boundaries remain." Lauren smiled. "This is the board of a woman who knows her worth." And when I ran my hand over the blank cork, no ledger needed, I felt claims unspoken but understood. Receipts never lie, but truths remembered, they rewrite everything. The cafe opening was supposed to be Harper's triumph. Fairy lights strung overhead glowed gold. The espresso machine hissed like applause, and the soft clatter of cups created a hopeful symphony. Friends, neighbors, and curious locals filled every table. The air smelled of fresh bread and ambition. I stood just inside the front door, oak floors creaking beneath me. My heart thudded in sync with the low hum of conversation. I'd worn the blue blouse she once complimented, what she called my confidence color. But tonight, it felt more like armor. I gripped the envelope of receipts in my hand, the paper stiff from urgency and purpose. When Harper looked up, her smile faltered. The world paused. Her eyes, once warm and bright, widened in recognition and something like shock. Mom? She whispered, voice thin and unsure. I stepped forward. I'm here. My tone held more authority than I'd felt in years. Guests turned. Espresso steam curled in the air. Owen stiffened behind the counter, wiping his hands on a paper towel. I held out the envelope. You stole from me. Silence fell like glass. Harper's face paled. Stole? Mom, what are you talking about? Owen pushed forward. Ruth, this isn't, but I ignored him. Instead, I reached inside the envelope and placed the first receipt on Harper's manager's desk, within her view but far enough to keep the stage neutral. $17,500, advance business rent. Then another $12,000, annual interest, $85,000 total. I watched her swallow. Those are mine, I said softly. The cafe lights glinted on my tears. I co-signed the trust. I funded every unexpected expense. I held it all so you could build this. She flinched. Mom, Her voice broke. I remembered caring for her when she was sick as a child, tucking blankets, soothing fever dreams. Every quiet vigil echoed tonight. Owen, I said, meeting his gaze, you used that trust. His jaw clenched tight, eyes flickering guilt. Don't speak for her. He stepped back, silence reverberating through the espresso steam. Harper's throat worked. She reached for a cushioned chair. I waited, the envelope now open, a small storm of white papers around me. Guests looked away. The cafe lights glinted. It felt like the universe caught its breath. Finally, Harper spoke. I used it. I didn't know it was yours. Owen said it was ancestrally ours. Her voice wavered, edged with regret. I thought it was mine to use. No, I said, voice firm. It never stopped being mine. You replaced it in silence. Her eyes filled. I'm sorry. The word trembled between us. Tension broke. Steam curled. Laughter returned, but the cafe's melody felt off. I set the next receipt on the table. $4,500. First month's rent. She stared, trembling. You erased me, I whispered. By not telling me. By calling me a cosigner, not a partner, not a provider. She looked down. I didn't want conflict. Conflict isn't death, I said. Erasure is. Owen stepped forward. Ruth, let me explain. I lifted a hand. Number this is hers. Silence held again. Light from the fairy bulbs sprinkled dust motes in the air, tiny witnesses to this reckoning. Harper closed her eyes. In the hush, I saw a flash. Her as a toddler at home, feverish and fragile, and me lying beside her, whispering comfort. I remembered the weight of motherhood. I felt it now. When she opened her eyes, tears glistened. I want to fix this. I don't know how yet, but I want to. I nodded slowly. That's a start. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. Let's go somewhere quiet, please. I looked around. Guests resumed ordering. The cafe's hum returned. The table I'd left my receipts on glowed with soft cafe light. I took her hand and led her out into the moonlit patio. The fairy lights trailed overhead like constellations guiding us. She squeezed my hand. I didn't speak. No apology needed yet. We just held space. Inside the cafe, laughter and clinking cups drifted toward us. Another world. I closed the door slowly. A final soft click. Behind us, golden lights continued to glow. But now they felt like invitations, not distractions. And as the door closed in slow motion, I realized the past may haunt us, but truths, once illuminated, can free us. The cafe had emptied out by mid-morning, leaving behind the scent of roasted beans and artificial eucalyptus. Chairs stood half-pushed under bistro tables, as if the guests had left in a hurry. Empty espresso cups, lipstick smeared and rimmed with sugar, dotted the countertops. Outside, the fairy lights blinked one by one in retreat against the pale morning sun. Harper stood at the entrance, arms folded tight against her ribs, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder. The autumn wind was sharper today. She hadn't dressed for the chill. Her shoes made soft sounds against the tile as she wandered toward the counter, where 2 receipts still sat. Mine. They hadn't been moved. The manager hadn't thrown them away. They just waited. I wasn't there anymore. But the evidence remained. In her hands, Harper held her phone like it weighed more than she could carry. A new message from Owen blinked on her screen. Owen. Don't say anything. This isn't her business. She signed it away, remember? 2 seconds later. Owen. If she talks, we bury her with the contracts. Trust me. Then, Owen. Delete this. Harper didn't reply. She stared at the words, her fingers hovering, her throat tight. Instead, she opened a separate thread. My name at the top. The last text between us was from a week ago. Let me know if Camden liked the sweater. No reply. Now she typed. Harper. I didn't know about the trust. Not really. I didn't ask enough questions. I let Owen handle too much. I'm sorry. She stared. Deleted the last sentence. Harper. I didn't know about the trust. Not really. Send. Then nothing. Across town, I was standing at the sink, rinsing the last of the wine glasses from the night before. The silence felt like breath held too long. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and pine cleaner. Lauren had stayed late, but she hadn't said much after the cafe. She brought pie, apple and sage, and set it on the counter without asking if I had room in the fridge. She knew I did. We hadn't talked much. We didn't need to. I don't know if I want her to apologize, I'd said finally, breaking the quiet. I just want her to see it, all of it. Lauren had tilted her head. You want her to feel it? Yes, she won't, not right now. We both knew that was true. Now, in the clear light of morning, I took the photo off my refrigerator. It was old. Harper in 3rd grade, arms wrapped around my neck, my cheeks pink from chasing her through the park. The sun had caught her curls just right. I brought it with me to the car and slid it behind the visor. For the first time in years, it wasn't meant to remind me of what I'd lost, just of what I once carried. When I turned on the ignition, my phone lit up. A message. Harper. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the name glowing across the dashboard, her words waiting in limbo. My chest ached, not from sorrow, at least not just from sorrow. There was something else now, a strange steadiness. I drove, aimless at first, past the town square, the fire station, the stretch of cracked sidewalk where Harper fell on her scooter at 5 and bled all the way home, past the new luxury condos where the old pharmacy used to be, past the church where Thomas and I had once danced at someone else's wedding. Then I parked in front of an empty open house. A sign in the yard read, Dream starts here. No one was inside. The realtor had left a key taped under the mat. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car and stared through the windshield, my hands tight around the steering wheel. The emotion came fast. Tears filled my eyes and spilled down before I could process them. Not the kind of sobbing that breaks something open, but the kind that says, it's over. The kind that says, you did everything you could, and it wasn't enough. But also, you did everything you could, and that's enough. The tears weren't just for Harper. They were for me. For the version of myself I'd kept folded in corners. For the receipts that proved I wasn't just present, I was foundational. For the nights I went without so she wouldn't have to. For every invisible signature I ever left behind. For the years I mistook proximity for love. A knock on the window startled me. I wiped my face quickly. Lauren stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. No smile, just presence. I opened the door. You looked like you needed a second cup, she said. Always, I replied, my voice raw. We sat in silence, sipping from our cups, watching the sun creep higher over the neighborhood. The breeze picked up, leaves scraping across the sidewalk like old secrets trying to resurface. Lauren didn't push. I think I'm done, I said eventually. Done what? Trying to earn her. She nodded slowly. You were never a transaction. Number, but I let myself be measured like one. The warmth from the coffee seeped into my palms. I stared at the house again, its fresh paint, its hollow staging. Do you think she'll ever get it? I asked. Lauren tilted her head. Does it matter anymore? And just like that, I knew. No, it didn't. I wasn't here to wait for recognition. I wasn't waiting for Harper to build a bridge across the silence. I was building my own life now, frame by frame, not as a shadow in someone else's portrait, but as the full subject. When I got home, I placed the picture of Harper and me on a small shelf in the entryway, not to haunt me, but to remind me of a truth that had once been real, even if it wasn't anymore. A few hours later, I opened her text, read it. No reply. I drew a hard line that day. Not one made of bitterness, one made of clarity. I chose myself. And for the first time in decades, that was enough. I had never been the kind of woman who hosted things. Not really. For most of my life, I'd been the one who offered to clean up, who brought the extra folding chairs, who asked if we had enough napkins, the behind-the-scenes mother, the support beam, never the chandelier. But that Sunday, the table was mine. I called it Reclamation Sunday. I didn't explain it on the invitations. I just sent a message to a few women from the ESL Center, a couple from the library writing group, and Claire from next door. Bring something warm. Wear what makes you feel most like yourself. I'll handle the food. They came, all of them. The table was long, pieced together with 2 end leaves I'd never used before. I'd polished the old china, laid out linen napkins I found in the back of my grandmother's hope chest, and made 3 casseroles, 1 sweet potato and 2 egg-based. A peach cobbler sat in the center of the table like a sun. The scent of cinnamon filled the house. Bonnie arrived first, wearing a sweater with a loose thread she kept tucking under her sleeve. She brought cranberry muffins in a chipped baking dish and offered them with both hands, like she wasn't sure if it was enough. "It's perfect," I said. I meant it. Claire arrived next, her arms full of paper cups and a hot thermos of something spicy and citrusy. "It's a blood orange tea, or it was. It might be closer to punch now." Then came Jenna, the only one who asked, "What are we reclaiming?" with a smirk as she kicked off her boots. "Whatever was taken," I said. "Whatever we forgot we deserved." They liked that. They nodded and found seats, laughter already circling the room like a gentle tide. I served coffee in mismatched mugs. Some were mine, some were inherited. One had the name Thomas, written in fading ink. I set that one aside for myself. No one asked about it. When we finally sat to eat, the conversation danced lightly at first. Talk of traffic, of students, of sore knees, and grocery store prices. But then, as the second round of cobbler disappeared, something shifted. A kind of shared pause, like a group breath held and released in sync. Claire looked across the table at me, her spoon tapping against her bowl. "Why now?" she asked. "Why this brunch?" I swallowed. "Because I've spent too long being useful, and not enough time being real. And I don't want to wait until someone else gives me permission to claim my own life." Jenna nodded. "Amen to that." I looked down at my plate, then back up. "I used to think silence was strength," I said. "That motherhood meant absorbing, not resisting. That love was proven through endurance. But that belief cost me something I didn't even realize until it was gone." No one interrupted. So I started thinking, what would it look like to reclaim that space? Not as revenge, not even as healing, just as truth. Bonnie's voice was soft when she spoke. I thought it was just me, feeling like I was a background character in my own story. "You're not," Claire said. "I know that now," Bonnie replied, "but only just barely." The sunlight through the front windows shifted. It caught in Jenna's earrings, turned the peach skin of the cobbler golden. For a moment, the whole room looked sepia-toned, like a photograph you wanted to step into. I stood up, not dramatically, just so I could see them all at once. "I want to say something," I said. "Not a toast, just something I needed to say out loud." They watched me, not with expectation, but with presence. It felt holy almost, like church without the pews. I let someone use my trust fund to start a business, someone I loved. She called me her co-signer like I was a footnote, and I let it happen. I let it happen because I thought that's what mothers do. I thought sacrifice was my currency. No one moved. But now I'm changing the terms. I'm writing a new agreement, one where my name means something again, one where I stop explaining myself out of obligation and start honoring myself out of clarity. I took a breath. "So thank you for sitting at this table, for witnessing it, for letting me say that I matter, that we all do. Not just as mothers or daughters or teachers or neighbors, but as ourselves." Bonnie wiped her eyes with her napkin. Jenna nodded without speaking. Claire stood up and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. We sat like that for a while, not holding hands, just holding space. Then the conversation returned, lighter, stronger. We shared recipes. Bonnie promised to teach us how to make her grandmother's pickled green beans. Jenna joked about starting a monthly meeting called Women Who Forgot They Were Allowed to Rest. Claire offered to host the next brunch and said her dog would have to approve us all at the door. When they left, I packed the remaining cobbler into 3 containers and labeled them with masking tape and permanent marker. I cleaned the dishes without music. I liked the quiet now. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was mine. Later, I sat in the living room with my journal on my lap. I didn't write. I didn't need to. The words were in the room, in the warmth of the kitchen, in the echo of laughter through the hallway. The photo of Harper and me still sat on the shelf. I didn't hide it. I didn't burn it. I didn't let it define the day either. It was a fragment, a piece of a much larger mosaic. And today, I had added a new tile. Reclamation wasn't about revenge. It was about presence. And on that Sunday, for the first time in a long time, I was fully here. The light in my study was golden that afternoon, the kind of light that makes dust look like memory. It streamed across the hardwood floors and cast shadows on the bookshelf, brushing the edge of my writing desk where 2 sheets of thick, ivory paper waited. No lined pages this time, no journal, just 2 pieces of deliberate space. I took a deep breath, uncapped my fountain pen, and began the first letter. To Harper. I didn't date it. I didn't sign it at the end. It wasn't meant to be sent. It wasn't even meant to be read by her. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I needed to put it somewhere outside my body, somewhere the echo wouldn't destroy me from the inside. Harper, I loved you loudly when you were small, and then I loved you quietly when you stopped hearing me. I bent myself into shapes you never asked for, but somehow needed. I wore responsibility like a second skin, believing if I kept giving, you'd never feel the coldness I once did. But somewhere along the way, my love stopped being love and started being labor. Invisible. Expected. I paid your bills and stayed out of your way. I signed papers and kept silent. I let you redraw the map of our relationship in permanent ink, while I scribbled apologies into the margins. And when you called me just a co-signer, I heard my mother's voice in yours. Sharp, distant, certain. You didn't break me. You simply showed me where I'd never stitch myself back together. I still love you, but now I love me more. That's not cruelty. It's oxygen. If you ever want to know me again, really know me, you'll have to come as yourself, not the version that always assumes I'll show up no matter what. I'll be here, but not waiting. Living. Mom. I folded the page carefully. No creases. I slid it into a manila envelope and wrote in block letters on the front, "Do not open unless you're ready to see me." I placed it beside the fireproof box marked Legacy. Inside were the trust revisions, the printed receipts, and now a quiet truth, documented. The second letter was different. It wasn't to Harper. It was to myself. Neil had called the night before, checking in after our last legal meeting. "You've put the pieces back together, Ruth," he'd said, "but don't forget to archive the evidence of who you are now. Not for them. For you." That stuck with me, so I titled it, The Accountability Archive. Ruth, you survived your mother's silence and chose gentleness instead. You paid for your daughter's dreams and watched her turn your name into a footnote. You carried pain like it was part of the job, like being a mother meant inheriting harm and passing on a quieter version of it. You learned that invisibility isn't grace, that love without recognition is depletion. You found your spine. You built boundaries. You said no. You wrote checks, cleaned wounds, signed documents, showed up. You were there even when the room pretended you weren't. You asked for nothing. But now, you ask for everything. Acknowledgement, space, respect, and history recorded. You will not be forgotten because you remembered yourself. You matter. Keep going. I folded that letter too and slipped it into a different folder labeled Truth Written. It joined the others inside the desk drawer that once only held unpaid bills and post-it notes about Harper's childhood schedule. This drawer was mine now. Outside, the wind stirred the maple tree, scattering leaves across the porch. Fall was shifting to winter. Change wrapped everything in amber tones and the smell of distance. I stood at the window for a moment, one hand on the trust box, the other resting lightly on the edge of the folded letters. My thumb traced the ridge of the paper. There was no grand gesture here, no audience, no applause, just quiet completion. My legacy wasn't the money I'd given away, or the cafe I'd helped fund unknowingly, or even the receipts I'd cataloged to make my labor visible. My legacy was this: I documented the truth when it would have been easier to lie to myself. I wrote the parts of the story no one else bothered to tell. I gave my silence a voice, and now, finally, I could rest in that. It was a Sunday morning when the envelope arrived. Plain white, no return address. Nestled between a seed catalog I hadn't subscribed to and a utility bill that hadn't changed in years. The mail was as unremarkable as any other day, until I picked it up and felt the weight. Not heavy, but deliberate. I brought it inside and set it on the table beside my steaming mug of cinnamon tea. The light slanted softly through the blinds, catching on the rim of the ceramic cup. The trust box sat behind me on the bookshelf. The letters were still tucked inside, untouched since I placed them there last fall. I hadn't needed to reopen them. I carried their contents now, in my spine and my breath. I slid my thumb under the envelope flap and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Harper stood behind the cafe counter, her apron creased at the waist, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. The espresso machine steamed behind her, and in her hands, both of them, was our house brand. The one we had once dreamed about together in late-night conversations when she was 19 and full of futures. She was smiling. Not the public, sharp-edged smile she wore in press photos. Not the clipped, tight-lipped one she'd worn when speaking to me over the last few years. This smile was something else, something unguarded. Tucked behind the photo was a note, just a scrap of lined paper, torn at the edge. "She looks like you. No signature. I didn't need one." I stared at the photo for a long time. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. I just received it. Not as an apology, not as closure, just a gesture. Uncertain, incomplete, but real. The picture didn't undo anything. It didn't rewind time or smooth over the cracks that had widened between us. But it was something. Proof of what I wasn't sure. That she still thought of me, maybe. That someone else had seen it. Seen me in her. That even when love fractures, pieces remain recognizable. I walked to the hallway closet, took down the empty frame I'd kept for years, waiting, without realizing, for something that could fill it without false hope. I placed the photo inside. Next to it, on the mantel, was the one of me at 28, holding Harper at a farmer's market, both of us laughing, sunlight caught in the folds of our jackets, the tips of her shoes just visible under the blanket. Two women, two timelines, two truths, not facing each other, but not turning away either. I stood back, sipped my tea, let the morning light stretch between the frames like connective tissue. The house was quiet, no voices, no music, just the distant sound of a bird settling in the tree outside and the ticking of the kitchen clock. And then the words came, not loud, not rehearsed, just true. "She said I was just a co-signer," I breathed in. "I signed everything away from her." I breathed out. "But I signed myself back." The steam from the mug curled toward the ceiling. The scent of cinnamon and clarity filled the room. The envelope lay folded beside the cup. I didn't tuck it into the legacy box. I didn't file it with the rest of the evidence. This wasn't evidence. This was history, unfiled, unfinished, unapologetic. That night, I made a small dinner. Nothing ceremonial, just roasted vegetables, a bit of rosemary bread, and the quiet comfort of a recipe I'd once shared with Harper during a snowstorm when she was 12. I didn't light candles. I didn't set an extra place, but I set the table for myself with intention. When I finished, I opened my journal. The final entry had been months ago, but there was still space. I turned to a clean page. March 12th. She looks like me, but I no longer need her to act like me. That's the gift. I built a frame that didn't depend on being included. I held the paper, the silence, the trust, then handed myself back to myself. And now, I belong. Not to her. Not to the myth of motherhood. To me. I closed the book, ran my hand across the leather cover, stood. I walked into the living room, picked up the photo again. She was smiling. So was I. Not because everything was healed, not because anything had truly been fixed, but because in the end, there was this, a final frame that didn't need to prove anything. It simply held what was. And so did I. If you've ever been called just something, just a co-signer, just a helper, just background, then you already know. Erasure doesn't shout, it whispers. but so does awakening. If this story reached you, then maybe part of it was already yours. So stay with us for more truths that refuse to stay hidden. Don't miss out. If you enjoy impactful and thought-provoking stories, be sure to subscribe for more inspiring content, turn on notifications so you never miss a new video.